So, thank you so much for coming. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a businessman, as some of you know or don't. I've been out of business for the last year almost, completely dedicating my life to something that I call 1 Billion Happy, which is an initiative that's aiming to sort of re-educate our world about what really matters. 1 billion is not a crazy number, as I attempt to say. 1 billion is actually quite doable on the internet and hopefully doable with your help. And so we're trying to get 1 billion people around the world to remember that what really matters is happiness for oneself, but the compassion to make another person happy. I'm back in business. The good news is in London. So I hope to be here for at least a year as of July, starting an organization that you may have heard of in the news recently, an organization called Today. And today we'll be looking at basically fixing what I believe is a big problem for our planet in terms of our consumption. So we want to use a lot of technology to enable people to consume wisely without a negative footprint on the planet. So part of the compassion of trying to help everyone hopefully have a better life while at the same time basically being responsible for our impact. We're going to talk about happiness today, but we're going to talk about it from very, very different angles. We have 6 topics to try and cover between myself and Anahita. Anahita, as wonderful as she will always look on the stage, is really a shrewd coach, okay, who is known to coach, I don't know if that's, is it recording? I mean, she basically is based in New York, so she coaches some of the most stubborn business people on the planet, including myself. So often Anahita and I will engage in a conversation, often from 2 very different angles, which always brings us together to a midpoint that is enlightening for both of us. So we're going to do the same today.
After a few tears and after a few hairs being pulled out,
exactly.
We get to a nice.
So we're going to do this today, trying to approach the conversations from different angles, so that hopefully we can meet for you in the middle.
Well, thank you. Hello. So Mo usually introduces me as Tiny Beast. So I will introduce myself as Tiny Beast. I'm trying not to eat the microphone because it's covered up by my hair, but okay. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here, and I don't like standing up here and looking down on you, so I really apologize. I wish I could just come down and sit on the floor, which is what I usually do. But here we are. So I'm supposed to introduce myself. So I have a coaching practice called Neural Beings. And my focus is, as Mark mentioned, contemplative science, which is the convergence of Buddhist philosophy and practice and Buddhist psychology with modern science, specifically neuroscience, psychology, psychotherapy. So I'm trained in contemplative science in New York with some wonderful teachers who happen to be academics in the field of Buddhist philosophy, but also doctors and scientists and so forth. And this was something that was inspired by a question I asked the Dalai Lama in 2014. I said, Your Holiness, how do I, these Buddhist ideas are so inspiring. How do I communicate them to people who've never heard any Buddhist philosophy, any language from the school of thought? And he said, learn science. Learn reason, learn to explain it through the lens of actually quantum physics and neuroscience. And I was like, wow, quantum physics, okay. So I did my best, and I started my coaching practice so that I can reach people who, may not be so butterfly-like as myself. And then try to find a middle way. Try to help some of the executives that I work with who pay me a lot of money so that they learn to feel, who really cannot feel, or do not have any relationship with their bodies, or do not have any relationship to maybe other people, don't really know how to relate with others. So it's an interesting thing to do with your life. And I'm Iranian, German, in case you're trying to see. In case you're trying to guess my accent, I'm Persian. Is any Iranian person here? Oh, yeah. Salam.
Everywhere. They're everywhere.
Yeah, so I grew up in Germany, and I have a master's in social anthropology from here, from London, School of Oriental and African Studies. So I love to be back here. This is a place I suffered in a lot, and maybe that's a good segue into my little piece on suffering. I suffered a lot because I'm a human, because I have feelings. I was born in Iran after an Islamic Revolution, during a war. I had wonderful parents who loved me, but who maybe didn't have all the skills, all the parenting skills. So, in some areas they missed a couple of things. And I still love them deeply and dearly, but as you know, we are very easily impacted by negative experiences. And those negative experiences, they remain in our psyche as implicit narratives, implicit memories. And so I grew up angry, and I grew up very resentful. I felt like I was not seen. And as a result, I went from punishing it myself, taking it out on myself, to, being in the clubs of London at, 7 in the morning, and you don't want to know the rest. But suffering is real, and actually, as a Buddhist student, you may know the Four Noble Truths. The first of the Four Noble Truths, the first sermon that the Buddha gave, he said, life is suffering. Suffering is a reality, and all of us in this room, we may be here to find some measure of happiness. Our motivation is the pursuit of happiness. But if the definition of happiness is the absence of unhappiness, is the absence of suffering, then there is no other way to arrive at this beautiful reality, this innate state of happiness, unless we get really radically honest about what makes us suffer. And that's why people hire me to speak about happiness, and I just make them really miserable by bringing their suffering to their awareness. And so that's what I would like us to start. It takes courage to achieve happiness. It takes courage to become an integrated human being. And you have to be willing to get your skin ripped off, like more than once, maybe on a daily basis. And it's not fun. And I've had it. Who has experienced the hardship of being on the path, being a practitioner on the way to happiness? Who has felt the impact, the hardship, the struggle? It's real. So, each one of us in this room suffers. And if we look at the definition of suffering, of course, we can see suffering as, are you lying there in this, position? Are you? Wow! Beautiful, I like it. He's like a reclined Buddha up there. He's lying on the chairs. So there is the gross level suffering. We all die. We're all going to age. All of our faces are going to sag. I literally look in the mirror and I'm like, every day I feel like it's sagging more. It's pretty, disturbing. And we are going to lose our health. We're going to lose our loved ones. Reality of gross level suffering. Then there's a suffering of impermanence. As soon as we have something beautiful, a good moment, a good relationship, a home, health, it's gone. I mean, fast forward a little bit, but it will leave. It's all like sand falling through, the creases of our fingers. It's impermanent. We can't hold on to anything. But the interesting type of suffering is what is referred to as all-pervasive dissatisfaction. Do you know that feeling? I bet all of you have it right now, when no matter what, something's always off. Something is not good enough. It might just be a need to fidget, or it could be something really existential, but there's always something better elsewhere. There's something that you have to attain or achieve in order to finally be happy. You understand that dissatisfaction that's driving all of our actions? That is at the heart of the word dukkha, which is suffering in Sanskrit. So I invite you, since I don't have much time, and I know Mo is giving me the look, stop talking.
I didn't, I swear. I was actually enjoying, for the first time, I'm on stage but not speaking, so I'm actually enjoying the faces of everyone as you nod and interact, and it's really wonderful. It's a very interesting way of connection. So yes, what would you invite everyone to do?
So I invite everyone to... But let's also just extend our minds to the suffering. All of us are relatively fortunate to be here and to have the luxury to come to the Action for Happiness talk. Imagine the people. Just try to extend your imagination to include all those who don't have the luxury of health, of fortune, of wealth, of whatever, safety, fundamental safety. So maybe, can we do a moment of contemplation and get in touch with the reality of suffering, whether it's your own perpetual dissatisfaction, whether it's the suffering of waking up every day and having to take on life, whether it's the suffering of others that we can't necessarily see but are going through immense pain and suffering in this moment. So I invite you to not conceptually connect with it, but in your body connect with it. You can close your eyes if it helps you. So connecting with the reality of suffering. And I invite you to, if you feel any resonance in your body, place your hand, one hand, on that part of your body where you feel the resonance when you contemplate suffering. Where do you feel it? And if you would like so, you can open your eyes and keep your hand there and look around the room and just see where your fellow humans may have a shared experience. Because I think one of the biggest reasons for suffering is we think we're alone in our suffering when we're actually all in it together. So on that basis of connecting, on the basis of reality of suffering, hand over.
So,
Thank you.
So probably one of the biggest challenges we have with happiness in our world today is that idea that we're unable to acknowledge the truth. So we chose the title Authentic Happiness for today because the realities are not up to the surface, if you want. We don't actually acknowledge them until we get those wonderful moments of contemplation. And believe it or not, we are at an age where our world is going through the highest rates of suicide in the history of humanity, even though life has never been better. Our life expectancy is better, technology is better, transportation is better. And even though some of us will not have it all and will have to work double shifts and so on, the reality is that at least we don't have to go out and kill anything to eat. You know, supermarkets are still full of food for all of us, and yet humanity is at an all-time low. When it comes to happiness, we have the highest suicide rates ever. Suicide is a mix of two things. One is depression and the other is despair. And that despair comes from our inability to confine in others, to share our feelings with others. And that inability, believe it or not, there was a research done in the US where 1 of every 4 people in the US, when they are unhappy, they don't have a single person to turn to. Okay? And yet we fake it. And that idea of faking happiness is what gets us to that level of loneliness where we cannot actually invite someone in and have that human support, that connection that makes us human. Okay? Now, when we talk about authentic happiness, I think the idea is to first talk about what's not authentic. Okay? The only way to know the truth, as per many spiritual teachings and philosophies, is to know what is not true. If you remove what is not true, what's left behind is the truth. And the question then becomes, so what else is not authentic? As we walk through the streets and show everybody that we're strong and smile in the office when they ask, how are you doing? I say, I'm fine, I'm absolutely okay, right? All of those fake masks that we wear, we take them into even our approach to happiness. So we don't only fake our happiness in front of others, we fake our own happiness to ourselves. And the biggest sign of that is a product of the modern world that I call fun. Okay? The difference between fun and happiness has blurred completely in our modern societies. In an interesting way, I think it might be an American export or maybe a British export to the world, which is to say, if you can't reach genuine happiness, we're going to replace that with a product that we can advertise, a product that we can sell to you, and that could either be a party, a drink, a trip, a vacation. It could be anything that is not really genuine happiness. Okay? It's just a replacement that makes you think that you're happy for a short while. Now, in my work, I define that as a state of escape. Even though you could be at a party and dancing and feeling that everything's amazing and the music's incredible and the person across from you makes you feel that you're on top of the world, but in reality, this is just a state of escape. The reason is it's escape because it ends. The minute it ends, you go back to unhappiness. And so in my happiness equation, I define happiness as events minus expectations. The way we find happiness in us is we compare the events of life to how we want life to be. If the events of life meet our expectation, we become happy. If it misses our expectations, we become unhappy. Okay? Now, interestingly, I am someone who probably has a much more negative attitude to rain than you guys do. Okay? Because honestly, to me, if it's June, it's not supposed to rain. Okay? Seriously, my expectation is totally in a different place. Huh? You're used to it. Rain, by the way, never made anyone happy or unhappy. Huh? Rain, if you wanted rain, say you're a farmer and you want to plant water your plants, rain will make you happy. If you didn't want rain, if your expectation is that rain is not the optimum environment you want to be in, you would feel unhappy. So in that definition, happiness simply is that peaceful, calm feeling you get when you're okay with life as it is. Okay? When you feel happiness, you're actually not jumping up and down. Jumping up and down is that feeling when we engage our physical form in activities that numb our brains long enough so that we actually don't think about our problems. We don't solve the happiness equation. And when we don't solve the happiness equation, we go back to our default setting, which is children that don't think about troubles, which is happy. Okay? Now, the interesting thing, the difference between happiness and fun, is actually encoded in our own bodies. When you feel happy, you get a hormone around you, secreted that basically is serotonin. Serotonin is a calmer. It basically has the exact meaning of the happiness equation. It's telling yourself, your body, your physical form, it's saying, I'm okay with this, don't change anything. Calm down, be peaceful, be okay, be quiet. Okay? When we have fun, we get dopamine, right? A reward excitatory hormone that basically keeps you going for more. The interesting challenge between them is that the minute you get dopamine in your blood, serotonin goes away. You can't be excited and calm at the same time. Dopamine pushes out your serotonin. So the more fun that you have, the more fun that you need. And the problem is that our brains adjust. After a while, from all of the doses of dopamine we have in our body, you start to want more and more and more and more. And so your brain's receptors, they downregulate. They become less sensitive to dopamine, and so you want more of it. It's almost like an addiction. Now, I don't want you to think that there is anything wrong with fun. Fun is wonderful if you've managed to find happiness. Okay? The problem with the way we consume fun in the modern world is we consume it as an escape, as a painkiller. So we take a dose of it. Your boyfriend says something annoying. Okay? So you tell yourself, you know what, this is too much for me, I'm going to go to the gym. You stand on the treadmill, you're running a little bit, your brain goes, we're going to die. And so it says, let me focus on this. Okay? As you focus on this, you're not thinking about your problems, you're happy. The minute you hit the showers, your brain goes like, are you trying to numb me? We have a problem. He said that you have one white hair, okay? And that means he's cheating, right? And you can make up a story based on that, and it can go on forever. So to differentiate between them, there is a need to find authentic happiness before we engage in fun, because if we engage in fun, we're taking the fake side of this, okay? And I think that we go to the fake side of it, honestly, because we don't know ourselves. So Anahita is going to talk about that, but before we do this, let's take 20 seconds to really ask yourself about your activities, let's say in the last couple of weeks, if those were genuine happiness, or if they were actually just a state of escape. You don't need to do anything about it, it's just an exercise of awareness. Tell yourself, is your resort when you feel unhappy to find genuine happiness or to find escape? And then we'll continue about our identity.
Okay. Should we ask them to share? Okay, who
You're
is really a pleasure seeker? Pleasure seekers?
Don't be shy.
And who genuinely seeks happiness? Who makes effort to find happiness?
Okay.
Yeah.
And the others that didn't raise their hands are just lazy. Yeah. Just like more than half of the audience. Yeah.
Who's lazy?
Yeah, who's lazy?
Okay.
By the way, if you haven't found the answer, we normally like to leave you with some homeworks. This is a very useful exercise to find that awareness inside you of, am I just a pleasure seeker that's trying to escape my troubles, or am I actually brave enough to face my troubles and find happiness?
Mm-hmm. And maybe I can just share a very quick anecdote. I was on my way to see His Holiness in Dharamsala, and we stopped at some Indian tea shop, like one of those tiny ones, where you have these little plastic tables and plastic. Everything is plastic. It's very sweet, and they bring you black tea. And I was sitting there, and I was with my tea. I was looking out the window and seeing mountains of trash, and I had this moment where, despite the plastic and the trash and the smell of cow shit and all of that, I felt that everything was just perfect. And I'm telling you, I get goosebumps just thinking about it, but it was one of those moments, and I was not high or anything. I mean, I was just, I was just sitting in a car for 15 hours driving up the Himalayan foothills. And I remember just thinking, you know what, it's all perfect. And that was so profound because it made me realize that it's our perception that's key, and I'm going to talk about the role of perception and happiness in a moment. But the other thing I thought is, why do we have to even say authentic happiness or like true love? There's either love or there's no love. There's either happiness or no happiness. In my opinion, I mean, it's a good debate that we can have, but like, what's authentic happiness? Like, do you understand what I'm saying? There's either happiness or not happiness. Happiness is authentic. Love is true. So it's funny how our language, our language is so loaded and so full of information about how our perception is actually a bit distorted. Anyway, I'm supposed to talk about the feminine. So the feminine, yeah. So one of the things I try to do, especially with both male and female clients that I work with, especially executives. And executives, getting to the top of the ladder requires you to, at least in our current paradigm, to sacrifice a lot. Who's sacrificed a lot for their careers? Put your hands up. Yeah, a lot. I mean, even and I'm like on, doing this kind of work, but it takes a lot of, living in New York is a sacrifice. Yeah. And
Don't call it living.
Huh?
Don't call it living.
Yeah, not living. Surviving in New York is a sacrifice. Yeah. So we sacrifice. We sacrifice not only the quality of our lives, our relationships, our loved ones, our health, but what we also sacrifice is the connection to ourselves. That beautiful, what they would call attunement to our inner life. It's something that our education system, first and foremost, doesn't even teach us. Like, we learn all the topics that we learn, but then we go off into the world and we don't even know, like, what is the mind? Like, there's not even a proper definition of the mind. Do you know Dan Siegel? Poor Dan Siegel has been, like, beaten by by his colleagues in the field of mental health, beaten up for having a definition of the mind, which I'm not going to tell you, but it's interesting. But there is no definition of mind. And, like, what about self-regulation? What about being able to navigate this ever-increasing complexity that we live in with awareness, with self-compassion? So these are skills we don't learn. And the funny thing is that in this left-centric paradigm, left meaning left hemisphere-centric, that continues to promote and to perpetuate these qualities that are oftentimes very innately masculine qualities. I'm not saying they're only pertaining to men. We women have masculine qualities too because we have left brains, and we are also conditioned. But the qualities of linear thinking, algorithmic thinking, goal orientation, the constant habit of reifying and objectifying things, trying to conceptualize and fix and hold things as if they're static, taking things apart and seeing things as disconnected, creating representations of reality without questioning them. So these are very, very much functions of the left brain hemisphere. And we women, we clearly, most of us, living in the kind of world we live in, we've internalized those qualities as well. So we're parched, we're disconnected from the realm of, let's just call it the feminine. ultimately, the reality, they say, in the Eastern philosophies is beyond concepts. So I'm just borrowing concepts here, but I'm not saying that reality is divided up into masculine and feminine. But for the sake of communication, I have to use these concepts. So the feminine, what does the right brain do? The right hemisphere likes to represent reality as it is. So it sees everything as interconnected and interdependent, right? So there is no thing that exists outside of a relative context. Who disagrees with me? Put your hands up, we'll debate. Everything is relative. So if everything is relative and everything is therefore constantly changing because its identity is not fixed, then there is no self-nature to that thing, but that's like heavy-duty Buddhist philosophy. If you follow me, put your hands up. No objective reality. Okay, you're all super intelligent. There is no objective reality. So everything is in a constant state of dance and relationship. But in our daily lives, as habituated creatures that like to see things as separate, we designate language and labels and chair and man and cup, and then we live by these labels. The worst label of all is self. Who agrees with me? The worst, I mean like the most difficult one, the most real one, the one that around which all of our life revolves is the self. And we don't even question it. But anyway, back to the feminine, and I'm like totally just blabbering here, but the feminine, the importance of the feminine, of integrating the feminine. As women, do we ever stop to ask ourselves, how connected am I? How much am I able to attune to my own inner reality? Am I connected to my body? Am I aware of this magnificent vehicle, of this magnificent system that I am, that I carry with me? Or am I just forcing it to perform and produce and sharpen its capacities for output? Or am I really able to tune in and be sensitive and be kind and gentle? And for the men, what's really fascinating working with male executives is, as I said earlier, their numbness to the realm of feeling, to the realm of vulnerability, which Brené Brown talks about so beautifully, but vulnerability. And so how much shame have men or our boys endured for having feelings, for expressing emotions? So what happens, naturally we dissociate. When something hurts us, early in life, we dissociate from that pain, we dissociate from those associations, so we become numb, we become shielded. And so over time, we just kind of, what did we just become robots? And then we're indistinguishable from AI, really. So the integration of feminine is something that I just want to, stress. And maybe you can do your homework or you can talk to me. I'm happy to share resources with you. But for the sake of time, I will not do an exercise now, and I'll hand over to Mo.
Let me talk about my side of this. So on my third book, I started to write the introduction, and the first 3 lines are basically starting with, "This is as far as I can take you," which is a message that my left brain told me as a man. I'm a Middle Eastern, hyper-masculine man, if you want, because of the conditioning of being raised in the Middle East. And literally, I got that epiphany somewhere around 5 years ago, maybe 5.5 years ago, where my left brain said, "This is as far as I can take you." Okay? And in my journey in attempting to succeed in life, my left brain was incredibly valuable. In my journey in attempting to connect to me, to find my spiritual side, to find my happy side, my left brain couldn't go far. And there is a need for a balance. Even with obviously I think you can see, even with a man, and I am talking to the men in the room, I think the biggest mistake we have done in our society, in our modern society, is that we stopped to empower the feminine. We simply said, it's good enough to have targets and timelines and objectives and organization and order. And as you can see, Anahita would be talking about something amazing, and I'm standing here in the corner with my left brain keeping order, keeping things on time, keeping things flowing. And because of that, we have things like global warming, because we lost the empathy that's found in the feminine brain. We have things like all of the anxiety and worry about the future, which is very temporal on the left brain, and so on and so forth. It's a massive, massive, massive switch that we need to do. We have faked, all of us, we have faked that we are half humans. Okay? And so if you want authentic is that every single one of us has 2 sides. Okay? None of you, I can assure you, can walk to this room without having both brain hemispheres engaged. But we've prioritized one of them, we've glorified one of them, and we've lost the other. Okay? And perhaps a big call to authentic is that for everyone in this room, perhaps women a little more than men, if I can say, show the world what it's like to be feminine. Okay? Show the world how much we've missed by losing those feminine qualities that are simply supposed to be the master, while the left side is the execution. Okay? Now, this idea of being hyper-masculine that comes from my conditioning of being brought up in the Middle East is something I've worked on tremendously. And I actually will tell you today in front of everyone, I am probably more feminine than masculine in my qualities. I use coaches like Anahita, like Sonia in the Netherlands, and like my wonderful daughter here, who is hyper-feminine as well, and who's telling me how to find those qualities. Okay? Why do I need those coaches? Because the rest of the world is telling me fake news. Okay? So I have an ability, a psychic ability, to tell you the future. Okay? If you open the breakfast show tomorrow on any of the channels in the UK, it will go as follows. Something that a politician is doing that will aggravate a bit of the society, followed by an accident or some pain or blood shed somewhere, okay? Followed by a little bit of anxiety about something that might happen but hasn't happened yet and no one knows if it's going to happen, okay? Followed by a little bit of confusion about Brexit, okay? And all of the different sides of Brexit and how whatever anyone will do is wrong, okay? Stay is wrong, leave is wrong, stay and leave at the same time is wrong, don't stay and don't leave is wrong, okay? Anything you will do is wrong because every side of it is going to go in the wrong way. And then finally, they will have a cute child somewhere to tell you that there is hope in the world, okay? So please, watch the news tomorrow. This is what you're going to get. In that order, okay? Confusion, fear, pain, suffering, and then some fake hope. Okay? Now that's the reality. I see that because I don't live here. So when I switch it on in the morning, I find it really odd. But it's not odd at all. It's the reality of our life. Every piece of news you get exposed to is fake. Why is it fake? Because it's not authentic. Why is it not authentic? Because the truth, as we always say in the court of law, is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Okay? If they're not telling you the whole truth, it's fake. Okay? If they're not telling you the positive side and the negative side, it's fake. If they're not telling you, if they're telling you nothing but the truth, like the expert that stands in front of you and say, look, I have white hairs because I've invested my whole life trying to make charts that will dazzle people. The chart I will want to show you today will show you that British people on average don't know exactly what it is that I'm saying, and then he would disappear. Okay? And that kind of, of information somehow comes into our heads and shapes what we think is our reality. Now, I coached a group of very, very high-level individuals from Belgium a couple of months ago. They sat there, and like most Europeans, they debated everything to hell and back. Okay? So I would say this is a black T-shirt, and they will say, let's discuss if it's black or not, or if it's a T-shirt or not, okay? Or if it's a this or not. And I sat there quietly, impressed by how 12 people could produce so many words, okay? And at the end of day one, I said, guys, they asked me a question and they said, why do you think Americans innovate more than Europeans? And I said, because you talk too much, okay? And so they said, but it's important to talk. And I said, why? Why do you debate so much? Okay? And they told me, because when we debate, we find the truth. Now, that touches my heart. I want to find the truth. And I said, seriously, that's a wonderful cause to have, debate to find the truth. Have you ever debated anything that the world has told you or that your brain has told you? Okay? Something that you keep blabbering to the world, beliefs that we have inside us. Have you ever debated when your brain told you politics are the most important thing on the face of the planet because I have to have an opinion? Since when did you have an opinion? Okay? Seriously, have you ever debated the statements that we tell ourselves? We live in a world of fake knowledge. Now, I talk about this from a scientific point of view. I've followed science since age 6. I was incredibly interested in physics. The physics that I studied when I was 6 as the truth has nothing to do with the physics today. And in the middle, physics itself changed around 7 times. Okay? Every single one of them, we thought it was the truth. Okay? As Einstein once said, in theory and practice are the same. In practice, they're not. Okay? The reality is we have no idea. All of that stuff that gets put into our head is so fake. Horror movies are fake. Violent movies are fake. All of the news is fake. All that's on the internet is fake. And who's consuming all of this? You. Okay? And so when I was told as a Middle Eastern growing up that a man should wear blue and black, I grew up until age 34 believing that my favorite color was dark blue. Okay? I told myself, not the world, that my favorite color was dark blue. At age 34, I realized it was orange. Okay? And so for 6 years running, I always wore something orange. Even today, I wear something orange. Okay? But it took courage for me to tell myself, what is the truth? What is the truth? Is what my brain telling me the truth, or is this what I hear in media? Because if we actually find the truth, most spiritual teachings will tell you that happiness is found in the truth. So maybe you can take us through the spiritual, philosophical side and the scientific side of how to find the truth.
The truth? Oh gosh, okay. Well, I would say, I don't know, personally I don't know if there is an objective truth. So has anyone found the truth? So maybe the important, the only way to arrive upon the truth is inquiry, is the path inward, is maybe, as Mo was suggesting, challenging our perception, challenging the reality that we take for granted, the objectively existing reality, which all of you raised your hands when I asked you, are you familiar with this concept, that there is no objective reality. So if there's no objective reality, and maybe you could say a word about quantum physics and the notion of there not being objective reality. Would you like to just add
Let's do that at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is no objective reality according to quantum physics. And actually, we just had an audience with His Holiness Dalai Lama in Dharamsala in August, and that was the one thing that he really wanted to get across as well. So if that's the case, then what is the role of one's own mind? What is the role of one's own perception or one's own consciousness? So that is the only way we can really arrive at the truth from my understanding and being trained for like 15 years now within the Indian and Tibetan philosophical system, the path inwards. So how do we do that? Who's meditating? Who's got some kind of mind training or meditation practice? Yeah, beautiful. So most of us here are familiar with the concept. And who has, as a result, whose life and quality of life has increased? Whose happiness has increased as a result of the inner work? Okay. And have you found the truth internally? Have you been able to touch upon the truth? Have you been able to feel what is true? How about feeling the truth? How do you navigate? What is your compass for navigating life? So some of my clients get into really difficult gridlock situations where they just don't know how to make a decision. And it's like, sometimes it's just like you can go round and round in a circle and you can't come to any conclusion. And the only thing I can say is you got to know it. You just have to know it. And that takes us into the realm, perhaps the domain of maybe what they would call the metaphysical, maybe the esoteric, or maybe it's just reality. I don't know. These aren't other labels. But how about knowing? How about really being able to know what is right and what is wrong? Having that ethical compass. Having that quality or that resource which they call intuition or wisdom. So who resonates? Who has had an experience of being able to navigate life by way of knowing, really knowing internally in your body? So when you get into challenging situations where you have to make decisions, and the head sort of has you running around in circles, which is actually, most of the time, is an overactive default mode network, which is a network in your brain, which is specifically designed to perpetuate and update models of the self and the world. So when we go beyond that, so we have metacognitive experiences, right? So we go beyond cognition, we go beyond the conceptualizing mind, the habit of clinging and reifying. We access what one of my mentors, who's an astrophysicist, calls groundwater. And I go like this because to me it's something that I feel in the lower part of my body, which I have no shame in saying that I have one. We all do. It's something that resonates there for me. It's almost like, the concept of groundwater is something which is always there but is not necessarily visible to the eye, right? So you find it by way of negation, by way of eliminating layer upon layer upon layer. And this is something you do in the laboratory of your own mind, in quietude, withdrawing from your sense perceptions and gradually stilling, calming the mind until you arrive upon what they would talk about in Dzogchen, the natural mind. Does that resonate? Anybody? Natural mind? Has anyone touched upon that mind, that essence of mind, which is really spacious and really luminous and has that innate sense of knowing? And that's really what meditation or the Eastern, mind training practices are designed for. It's not for blissing out. It's not for more increased productivity so that we can make Unilever and Procter & Gamble more efficient and rich. It's so that we can break out of the cycle of suffering. By understanding the power of our minds, by starting to identify perhaps beyond our limited concept of self, we can perhaps attain a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more kindness, a little bit more tolerance. And I think that's absolutely fundamental for happiness, not just for ourselves, but for everybody.
Yeah, and that's the reason why my left brain said, I can't take you any further. Okay? My left brain is unable to get this. If you have seen the TED Talk by Jill Bolte Taylor, so she had a stroke that sort of disabled her left brain for a while. Please see it. Okay? The idea is that the truth, surprisingly, because of the complexity of the world, cannot be attained here. It needs to be attained here. There is that sense of knowing that I've been training myself to get for the last 5 years. Now, the trick is this. I don't want to confuse you, but on physics, if you just take the physics of it, I actually don't exist. You're not supposed to see me. Okay? The reality is that the entire mass contained in this fat body is literally smaller than a pinhead. Okay? The forces between the atoms and the molecules, the things that hold me together, simply are just smaller than the size of a photon. And so when a photon hits them, it reflects back to your eye. Okay? And then it reflects back to your eye to create an electrical signal that your brain uses to create some kind of a shape interpretation. Believe me, you could be seeing this as black, and I could be seeing it as black. But the way you see black could be the way I see orange. There is absolutely no way of finding with analysis what the truth is. With words, the stuff that we use to understand what the truth is, what is an aromatic, orange kind of fruit that is fleshy and sweet? Can you guess that? It could be a mango, or it could be a peach. We don't have those abilities with knowledge to find that truth. Okay? You have to have those experiences at a very embodied level to be able to get to the truth. But one layer higher, when Anahita was talking about the idea of objective reality, for the sake of our happiness, which again Anahita said at the beginning is the absence of unhappiness, what you need to find is what is not true. Okay? It might be incredibly hard to find what the truth is, but just by knowing what is not true, you can clarify and remove a lot of what is known as unnecessary unhappiness. Okay? I took the example of your boyfriend or girlfriend saying something annoying last Friday. What they said is not what annoyed you. What annoyed you is a thought in your head that basically said, they don't love me anymore. Okay? That interpretation of that event in our heads into a concept, and that concept stands not to be true. I remember Aya and I had an argument back in Montreal. We rarely ever do, but I said something that wasn't appropriate, if you want, okay? And so Aya started to go like, no, I don't agree with this, and she got a bit irritated. And so I said, okay, baby, you know what, maybe I should go have a coffee, and then when I come back, we can talk about it when I've thought it through. The minute I walked out of the apartment, my brain told me, Aya doesn't love you anymore. Okay? Is that true, brain? So here is the interesting skill that has completely changed my life. I'm not trying to find the truth. Okay? I am. It's the objective of my life. But on day-to-day basis, on action-to-action basis, I'm trying to find what's not true. Constantly. Anything that the media tells me, anything that my friends tell me, anything that is common knowledge, anything that my brain tells me, I ask and I say, is that true? Okay? And when my brain tells me that Aya doesn't love you anymore, I will stop. And I actually did. I stopped in the middle of the streets of Montreal and I said out loud, what did you just say? What did you just tell me? Are you saying that the love of my life doesn't love me? Give me evidence before you make that claim. Okay? When you start to debate what is true and what is not true, suddenly a lot of inauthentic events in our life become real. Okay? Suddenly you start to see that, with all due respect, if it's raining here in London, Mo, at least it's not raining bombs like it is in some other parts of the world. Okay? If Waitrose runs out of berries, okay, at least I'm not starving like some people are in India. Okay? If I'm stuck in the tube getting from one place to another in 25 minutes among a lot of wonderful people, okay, at least I have a way to move from one point to the other instead of walking there and dying on the way. Okay? Most of us forget those truths. We forget the elementary truth that we are actually, by the evidence of the fact that we are here in this room, we might actually be some of the luckiest people alive today. Okay? Just if you don't mind me saying, I'm Egyptian. Okay? Regardless what I achieve in life, I will never get the privileges that a British person would get if they travel across the world. There are 5 countries in the world that would welcome me. Okay? And that will never change. It will never change. Okay? Just because I was born in Egypt. I love Egypt. I'm proud to be Egyptian, but that's the truth. And most of the time when a German travels somewhere and just goes through the passport control and then on the other end texts me and say, did you die? Did they catch you? Right? These are the small truths that we need to remember every day, because you know what? Gratitude, that feeling of gratitude, is the absolute fix of the happiness equation. Happiness is equal to or greater than the events of your life minus your expectations of how life should behave. Once you establish gratitude, suddenly you realize that the events of your life are not only meeting your expectations, they're beating your expectations to the point where you should be grateful. Okay? If we avoid the fakeness of the modern world, the fact that when we look at someone driving a Rolls Royce, too many of them in London, okay? When someone is driving a Rolls Royce, if you forget the fact that this makes him, not it's a fact, if you forget the lie, the fake conditioning that this makes him luckier or better than you are, if you see the reality of just the love of your loved ones could be something that that person would never attain, regardless of the Rolls Royces, you would realize the truth. So what I ask you to do is, every time your brain brings you a thought that will make you unhappy, just stop in the middle of the street and say, what did you just say? Is that true? Is it true? Because if I'm going to spend an hour of my life feeling unhappy, I might as well spend it on something that is true. Because if it isn't, I might as well drop it. Okay? I'm sorry to tell you this, and I know I'm not British, so I don't have the right to talk about this, but who cares about Brexit? Like, seriously, since this whole thing started, has your life changed in any way? Other than the fact that you're bombarded with annoying messages every day. You're still on the same transport to work. You're still meeting the same people. Hopefully you're still with the same loved ones. Everything's the same, okay? I don't mean to over-exaggerate the simplicity of this. If you're not thinking about all the messages they're telling you and the future that might collapse in 250,000 years' time, okay, or in 2.5 years' time, now is okay, okay? As long as we're here in this room, there is no Brexit. Everything's fine, okay? And what I'm trying to say is maybe there will be a truth that we need to address about this. Until today, I apologize to tell you, you can watch the news for as long as you want. You're not going to do anything about it. There is one more truth that I think is worthy of everyone's attention. And I think it's the truth that liberates us all, which is the truth of not focusing just on oneself and an individual selfishness, but to focus on others. Compassion.
Thank you. Yeah, and actually on the note of what you're saying, I was in a cab coming here, and the cab driver said, "Okay, you look nervous, what's going on?" I said, "Oh, you know, I'm doing a talk. I always get a bit nervous before, and what are you talking about? Oh, happiness. Oh, yeah, no, that's not for us. You know, with Brexit, like, we can forget about happiness." And I said, yeah. I kind of politely laughed, and then before he was dropping me off, I was like, I just can't not tell him this. I said, you know, I agree, the conditions are difficult, and we are affected by our environment and the, you know, political and social and environmental realities and all the rest, but, you know, ultimately, it's in your mind. And I point here because, you know, in Buddhism, when we say mind, it's this here. This is the brain, this is the mind. I said, it's your mind. You can achieve happiness, irrespective of the conditions. I mean, we've heard of so many people that have been in far more dire situations and have managed to attain some measure of clarity and peace. So anyway, I had that little moment, and it was really eye-opening. But to compassion, well, I would say that, I would ask you, is it possible to have compassion for another if we don't have compassion for ourselves? So the root of compassion, genuine, authentic compassion, so I'm just, you know, negating what I said earlier, but like compassion, real compassion, can you have it for another if you do not have the source of it within yourself? And if you have the source of it within yourself and you have the intelligence to realize that you are a sentient being just like everyone else, how on earth can you forget about yourself? How can you just overlook or bypass your own suffering, right? And why suffering? Because, you know, compassion is to acknowledge suffering, whether it's in oneself or in another, and then alleviate it, do something about it. So how can we overlook ourselves? Who is a compassionate person who gives a lot and is in service but doesn't often give to themselves? Raise your hands. And I wonder if it's really possible to give sustainably and to give generously and to give authentically if we don't give to ourselves and if we don't have that resonance with our own suffering and our own fragility and the reality that any moment we can die, any moment any one of us here can die, and the time of death is uncertain. We can all be subject to illness, to all the strife and misery in the world, and we're all so fragile, and yet we're so numb to our own suffering. So in order to be able to really extend ourselves and have compassion and maybe even be activists, I think many of us here are doing something for the environment or for social causes, but really we oftentimes forget about ourselves. So then mindfulness comes in handy because, you know, mindfulness is criticized so often. Mindfulness has become another commodity, but really what the Buddha was teaching with mindfulness as one of the many tools for achieving enlightenment, it is basically nothing more than a container of awareness in which you can relate to your experience without judgment, with radical honesty. And the beautiful thing is when you relate to your experience, when you hold your experience in awareness, what happens? It transforms. You diffuse the power of that affliction or of that whatever difficulty you're going through when you can just hold it. So in a way, it's that parent that most of us haven't had, right? So most of us have had wonderful parents, but they didn't quite know how to respond to or relate to our inner life. So mindfulness is creating that inner parenting environment within yourself. So once you can do that, no experience that you have has to be left out. So that makes you equipped to deal with everything on a moment-to-moment basis. Does that make sense? So it's like you build a relational home, as Mark Epstein talks about. So your home becomes your own mind. Your refuge becomes your own mind. And within that mind, you then gradually start to become more and more sensitive to your suffering. Every moment of your day, instead of going to have another cake, which is another way of just quick dopamine fix, or calling a friend to distract yourself, you know that if you're in pain, you can sit, you can tune in, you can calm your nervous system, you can downregulate your nervous system, activate parasympathetic, you can soothe your mind, and then you can actually inquire into the experience of your suffering. And by doing that, you reduce its power. Once you do that, then you are equipped to extend, in my opinion, then you can really resourcefully give to another person. And, quoting one of the Buddhist masters, Shantideva, he said, all the happiness in the world comes from wanting happiness for others. All the unhappiness in the world comes from wanting happiness for self. So I think the basis for transcending the self, or achieving what Buddha called anatma, no self, is first integrating the self, is first healing the psyche. All of our fragmented pieces, dissociated parts, bringing them together in a coherent whole. And then once we have established a sense of healthy balance, integration, whatever we call it, we can then dedicate ourselves truly. And it doesn't have to be linear. Of course, we can do it simultaneously, but I think that genuine compassion comes when our own cup is full and when we are happy. So I always like to say, and maybe I'll end on this note, that the greatest act of generosity is to be happy. So you being happy and doing whatever it takes to achieve happiness, real happiness, so happiness.
Authentic happiness.
Happiness, full stop, is to be happy, which is really your essence anyway. So thank you.
Good. We have questions. So we have around 25 minutes for questions. We wanna close with a couple of remarks at the end. So, if you have any questions, yes, sir.
Thank you very much to both of you. Really interesting talks. Can I ask yourself? You mentioned about cake.
Yeah.
Just at the end, and I just wondered. I like cake.
Yeah.
Can we not eat cake anymore?
Oh, for sure, you can eat cake. You can eat cake. Oh, is that a serious question? I think it's a really relevant question. Eat it in an informed manner, right? So eat cake. Absolutely, have fun. Do whatever you do, but know that it's pleasure. And it's not going to give you the deep satisfaction that is going to last and is going to really make you feel content. That's all. So if you eat cake with awareness, go knock yourself out.
Also give yourself a target of one cake to another for every 4 cakes you eat. I think that's a good sort of quota.
Thank you.
Okay, one request I have, if you guys are okay with this, is can we try and enable more lady questions? So as you can always see, once we start to ask for questions, we get more men hands. So one man question for every one lady question. There you go. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. That was amazing. So when you coach one of these executives that are like on top of the world, how do you have a conversation when you are not like a butterfly and they are like, I'm so strong? How do you really connect your feminine with their masculine or their lack of using the feminine? I don't know. Any tips for the corporate world?
Yeah, I mean, first, I familiarize myself with that language, with the specific type of language. I refrain from saying things like, feel your energy, right? Open your heart. It's like they want to kill themselves when you say that. So don't do that. But really try to, level yourself, really relate to their subjective experience, to their upbringing. I mean, you have to basically... And also, the other thing is challenge whatever construct you have about the spiritual and the material being separate, right? So a lot of spiritual people who are inclined... Oops, there we go. At least
I don't have that problem.
I come across a lot of dear, beloved spiritual friends who are like, living by this assumption that somehow the material world is devoid of spirituality. Like, where does that come from? I mean, from my understanding, one of the best quotes I heard is, phenomena is essentially identical, conceptually distinct. So if you look at the Heart Sutra, which is one of the teachings of the Buddha, he talks about emptiness is form, form is emptiness. So matter and spirit are inseparable. Let's just drop that whole conversation. So there's no need to talk about chakras or energy or heart opening. You can access them at the, at a level that's perhaps a bit more cerebral, and then gradually, seduce them to the realm of feelings, and it's ultimately make them feel safe.
Yeah, sir.
Hello. Yep. Hi. First of all, thanks very much. That was great. I just wanted to play a game. If we were a room of the least fortunate people, full stop, and I mean relativistically, I suppose. So there is no one less fortunate available. So how would you approach this meeting and conversation? So I'm assuming you might give it a different twist, but and I'm genuinely interested in the positive kind of outcome here, because I'm really interested in what you say, of the tone you take, maybe the things you say, some of the more kind of philosophical points that you were raising earlier.
So one of my favorite questions. So one of the concepts I use to find happiness, to find gratitude, is a concept I call look down. Okay? Look, the problem with our modern world is because they raise us to try and be competitive, because I need to be better to get the next job I get, I need to be better to get promoted and so on, is we always look up. We always say, oh, he's richer than I am, oh, she has a better house than mine, oh, and so on. And I know billionaires who are miserable because they are slightly less rich than other billionaires, and there are supermodels that are, about to kill themselves because they're slightly less thin than the other supermodel, right? And the reality is that if we start to flip that and look down, if you want the mathematical view of it, if we all start to look down and say, I'm more fortunate than the next guy or the next lady, then theoretically there needs to be only one miserable person in the world, because everyone else is a little better, okay? But that's not what we do. So the first answer to your question is to say, knowing that we're not the least fortunate people in the world, knowing that we're not the least fortunate, is a very, very interesting call to say, maybe I should be grateful for that. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is, surprisingly, some of the least fortunate societies in the world are actually the happiest societies on earth. Okay, so you go to Latin America, for example, if they're fed for today and they have enough to put on the table for the children, the rest of the day is dancing and having fun and connecting with friends and connecting with family and listening to music. And that's not because of the event. So most of our life, most of our unhappiness is not a result of the events of our life. It's always that comparison between events and expectations, right? So if my expectation is that I need a pension and a car and a big house and I need to be better than my neighbor and I need this and I need that, it's almost a recipe for always being missed. It's almost impossible to meet all of that. While in India, when the expectation is, if I eat today, it's going to be wonderful, then one bowl of rice with curry is fantastic. Okay? And surprisingly, it's not fortune or misfortune that makes most of us unhappy, because if you want fortune, the most fortunate countries on earth are the Scandinavian countries, where the subjective well-being measured by surveys is the highest in the world. But it's also the countries where we have the highest suicide rates on earth. So as Anahita was saying at the end, happiness is a question of the mind. It's a question of how do we view the events of our life, not just what the events really are.
Does that answer your question?
Nearly.
Okay, if you have something to add, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's a theoretical game, as in we pretend that we're with the least fortunate, as you said, the least fortunate person on earth, however that looks like. What happens to the philosophy, which I fundamentally agree with, when you get to that person or that situation?
How do you communicate? How do you
so you
share?
can't say there isn't someone worse off.
Right. So how would you impart this wisdom to somebody who doesn't?
Yeah, what do you do or what do you say?
I would say just be present with them, listen to them, sit in silence with them, ask them questions about their lives, inquire, show interest. I mean, that would be a very simple way of doing it, you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
A lady question this time?
Hi. So my question's on the concept of suffering, because I think you said something like, if you reduce suffering, then you can sort of achieve happiness. But what if you have, say, I don't know, an illness or chronic pain, or you've sort of lost a loved one? Then how do you break through that and then get to that state of happiness, you know, without constantly feeling down? And then my second sort of part, is you talk about compromise. And, you know, a lot of people make compromises when it comes to their careers, you know, not seeing their loved ones or their health and so on. So how do you know, what advice would you have on just having that balance?
Okay. Well, yeah, absolutely. I think most of us have been struck by some tragedy or some major loss in our lives, so it's inevitable that there will be some measure of pain. It's interesting, you talk about this too, the distinction between suffering and pain. Also, Buddha talked about suffering is oftentimes self-induced, and it's our own response to an experience. Whereas pain, oftentimes, like you said, chronic pain or, you know, imbalances in our health or well-being are beyond our control often. So ultimately, we can't stop the realm of pain and suffering to some extent. We can't really stop it. It's how we respond to it that really we have control over. So maybe your suffering can be a friend. Maybe it can actually usher you into a place where you can relate to the pain and suffering of others. So it gets us out of our myopic worldview where we only are concerned with ourselves. And most of us know when life goes our own way, we're just like, oh, everything's fine. Most of us don't even meditate anymore when everything's going well. Like, who starts really praying and meditating and doing mantras when shit goes bad? Most of us do. I do too. It's like suddenly I become like the most devout Buddhist ever. And then when like, things are going well, I'm just like, no, I'm cruising, it's fine. And I only, you know, kind of, it's habitual. I think about myself. So suffering makes us more gentle, makes our hearts more tender. And then we can actually resonate with the pain and suffering of others, which makes us a little bit more useful. And the beautiful part is we kind of forget about ourselves. And when we forget about ourselves, we get really happy. And that's actually neurologically also, we can validate that when the default mode network shuts down or it quietens down, so our rumination or self-preoccupation becomes temporarily suspended, we have much more elated experiences, we feel much more happy. The more we think about ourselves and ruminate, the more likely it is that we have depression and anxiety, and there's research behind this as well. And compromise?
Oh yeah, just about
just
having
don't
a balance.
compromise. Do you want to say something about compromise?
About compromise, don't compromise. No, seriously, don't compromise. So you know, I actually tend to believe that compromise is conditioned, okay? That we tell ourselves that we should let go of certain things to get other things, okay? The truth is, if something really matters to you, you shouldn't compromise, okay? You should try to make it, you know, your target, and then what you will end up doing is you will give up on the things that actually don't matter to you, and that doesn't count as compromise. Okay? The challenge we have is we want it all. But so I do a very simple thing that I call the swap test. And the swap test is a test of prioritizing. So, you know, I normally swap success and happiness is a very interesting example. We want to be successful with all of the extreme of success that we can achieve, and we want to be happy at the same time. And yeah, perhaps that should be our target. But if you were given a choice between being successful and not happy, or happy and not that successful, which would you choose? Okay? And the reality is, when you know that, whichever way you choose, I would suggest that you choose happy and not, you know, that successful. If you have your basic needs met, and happy is wonderful. Okay? But if you make whichever choice, then suddenly your prioritization doesn't actually think of the other one as compromise anymore. Okay? So if I'm telling myself I need to be very successful and I don't care if I hate my job, that's fair. Okay? I can go to a job that I hate every day, I can try to be successful and make money, and I sacrifice my happiness, and that would be compromise. Okay? If I tell myself I want to be happy, that means that if I don't like my job, I will take 6 to 8 months until I find one that makes me happier. It may pay me a little less. It might not be a career move, but it's making me happy. Okay? If you have that clarity, you're not compromising anymore. And I think that when Anahita was talking about knowing oneself, perhaps that's the most important exercise ever, is to swap and say, what do I want? What do I really want from life? And make that your priority, and the rest is really not that compromise. Yes, sir?
Doesn't being authentically happy in the way that you describe in an unjust society or a dysfunctional society work against changing that society?
Great question.
But and particularly if you're not even sure what the alternative is, because according to you, it's all objective reality anyway.
Great question. So if this question didn't come up, I would be very worried. Okay? So this is a great question. The question basically says, how can I be happy when the world is so unjust? Okay? 2 answers to this. One is, you don't have to be unhappy to fix anything. As a matter of fact, if you fix things when you're happy, you're going to fix them better. Our conditioning as children has been always based on, you can only take action if we make you feel bad about yourself. You can only take action if we make you feel angry about something outside you. Okay? And that conditioning is actually not true at all. I'm taking a lot of action to make 1 billion people happy because I believe that we're in the 11th hour. I believe that our world is very unjust. Not only about politics, I believe that we're killing 120 species a day, is it? 120 species, not 120 creatures, 120 species a day. America slaughters, if I remember the number correctly, 300 million animals. No, sorry, 10 billion animals a day for 300 million, a year for 300 million people. It is disaster. We're losing, if you haven't watched Our Planet, the documentary on Netflix, watch it, please. Okay? We're very, 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 very unjust. We're unjust to ourselves. We're unjust to our planet. We're unjust to every living being. Okay? And in our constant strive for more, we're throwing it all away. Having said that, I don't hate anyone that buys a Pret-a-Manger plastic bottle. I don't hate them. I don't feel angry at them. I don't feel negative about it. I can engage and show my point of view by saying, I prefer not to buy plastic anymore, okay? Personally, and I urge every one of you not to buy plastic. But if you do choose to buy plastic, maybe this is not your cause. Maybe you have another cause, okay? Now, there is a way to motivate yourself with the positive. And that actually is an exercise I did deliberately around 8 or 9 years ago. I sat down and I said, why are you always motivating yourself with negative emotions? Why is it always, I want to win another deal because I don't want the competitor to win it? Okay? Why don't I tell myself I want to win another deal because I really give my clients good customer service and I really want to make my customers happy? Okay? Why do I want to sell because I want to make more commission? Why don't I say to myself, I want to sell because I actually take a lot of attention to what the customer actually needs, and when I offer them something good, it's good for everyone. Okay? We can motivate ourselves. Why do we have to motivate ourselves with anger? Why don't we motivate ourselves with love? Okay? And the point where you stop and tell yourself, I will try to make the world a better place, but I will make it from a place of peace and calm and compassion to everyone else. Everyone will flock to you, try to help you. Rather than our angry shouts and, why? We don't have to be negatively motivated to do the right thing. And I think truly, when I say pick your fights, okay, and I don't mean to belittle the situation about Brexit or whatever, but I actually pay a lot of attention. I was part of the Arab Spring. Okay? And I lived in Dubai at the time, and I watched the news every night, and it killed me. It killed me not only because it was very unjust, but because I realized that regardless of how senior and impactful I was in society, I had zero influence. I had zero influence. By watching it every day, I wasn't able to make any difference. Okay? So what do I choose to do? I choose a cause. and my cause is happiness and compassion through 1 billion happy, and I dedicate my life to that cause. Okay? When someone comes to me and says, by the way, Mo, plastic in the ocean in Bali is a problem, and we need you to leave what you're doing and come help us with plastic in the ocean in Bali, I will say, hey, I think it's a problem, and I'm so happy that you're putting your effort in it. It's not my cause. As a human being, I can only champion 1, 2, maybe 3, okay? And if I can champion those, I measure my impact. If I have no impact, then why should I bother myself at all? So instead of motivating myself by the negative for everything in a world that is totally unjust, okay, maybe I should motivate myself by the positive, by the hope that we can make the world better in 1 or 2 causes that I can actually influence. I think that would be the difference.
And I would also like to add, it probably shows that you have a sensitive heart. You're a sensitive person, you're sensitive to the world and to the injustice, which is a beautiful quality. You have capacity for compassion. So I just want to acknowledge that. And also the happiness that we're talking about is a happiness that leads to engagement, leads to informed, intelligent actions based on awareness, self-awareness, awareness of others, awareness of the impact of our actions. You know, according to the Buddhist teachings, every thought you have, every word you utter, every action you take has a consequence, has an impact. So all of this is to make us more aware and more intelligent in our actions. And I think that when we're happier, you know, we tend to create better relationships, we have better health. That health allows us to be much more involved in the causes for a longer period of time. The relationships, our community that we're in starts to flourish as a result of our happiness, of the joy that we share with them. So it doesn't impact it from the issues from a top-down point of view, but it does from a bottom-up, and it might take generations. And that's where actually the Dalai Lama has a curriculum that he developed with Emory University in the US called Social, Emotional, and Ethical Learning, C-Learning, which teaches children from kindergarten to 12th grade the skills of attention regulation, awareness, self-compassion, you know, interpersonal relationships on the basis of empathy. So really, I think the systemic change comes from our education system and from imparting these pro-social qualities onto our children. And for those of you, and I'm not, but those of you who are parents, it's the qualities that you embody and that your children mimic and internalize. So are you taking responsibility for that? Because I don't know, we can shout at the issues all we want, but we have to internalize those values ourselves. And one thing I want to add is, I may have made a mistake. There is no objective reality independent of a subjective reality. Just to finish that. Thank you.
Don't you guys adore how when I get asked a question, I talk about order and prioritization, and this is how we're going to solve it, and then she starts by saying, that shows you have a sensitive heart. Okay, so you know, this is why we're both on the stage. Yeah. Another question? Yes.
It kind of ties into the last question. So how do you achieve, so I'm Greek, my parents are very old-fashioned. I've lived in New York, I lived in London. I've kind of moved ahead as a person, but I seem to go back into my family and find these like really negative, toxic patterns. Within the family unit, it's very hard to escape like it is politics or anything else. How do you achieve happiness within this toxic cycle of history constantly repeating itself?
Oh, jeez.
Sorry.
No, not at all.
I mean, I can share my own experience.
Yes.
I didn't have a toxic family in that sense, but I had a pretty dysfunctional relationship with my mom, to the point where I once punched a coffee maker and broke my right hand in an argument with her, because, you know, that's how angry I was. And, you know, and also I was part of the Iranian uprisings, remember, exactly 10 years ago, maybe even today. There was this uprising, pro-secular democracy in Iran, blah, blah, blah. And I became so angry. I became so angry at the regime that one day in front of the UN in New York, I just saw a government official and I started yelling like the nastiest things at him. And I thought, okay, it's time to change. I can't change the regime, but I can definitely change myself. I couldn't change my mother, I couldn't change my family situation, but I could have withdrawn for the time that I needed to do the work. So I kind of politely removed myself from Germany to put myself in New York, and I started working on myself. It took years, and every time I would go back home, I would be triggered, I would fall back into the same patterns. But those triggers are valuable. Those are gold. So instead of shunning them, avoiding them, hating them, you use that as resource, as material to do the work. As soon as your mother triggers you, your father triggers you, you're like, oh, interesting. Okay, let me get out my journal and take notes. This is what happened. This is how I felt. And little by little, you start identifying patterns. And then if you want to do the work to remove them, then you do it, and then over time you get results. My mother and I are best friends. Now we talk every single day. Mo has been witness to it. So in a way, it's like you change yourself, you change your world. That's my experience.
If I may add, remember, however, that you do own your mother. You owe your mother and father a lot. They brought you to the world, and you're here, and you're successful, and they did contribute positively to your life. When it comes to close family members, I always say you owe them love, care, and respect. But that's all you owe them. Okay? So if your mother has a different point of view from you, you owe her love, care, and respect. And I always bring up the topic of my son, Ali. So Ali used to have that very interesting approach when his mom tells him to do something, and he doesn't want to do it. So he would listen and say, Mommy, tell me why you want me to do this. And she would, say something, and then he will say, look, Mommy, I heard you. I don't want to do it, but I love you. Okay? And every single time he did this, his mother would go like, yeah, I love you too. And then, and then life goes on. Okay? So in an interesting way, because one day you may be a mother, and one day you may have that karma coming back to you. Don't forget love, care, and respect. Yeah.
You have a question. She's my childhood friend from Germany when I was angry and breaking things.
So no man questions? Wow, that's the audience. Okay, please.
Hi. Have you ever met someone that had so many unhealthy patterns that you couldn't help them?
No, seriously, leave them.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I was afraid that that's what actually you were going to say.
Absolutely. Attend to yourself first before you help others.
So do you give up on people then that you have met?
Well, I think we have different views on that.
I want to hear your view.
So let me give you my left brain view first, okay? Unless you're His Holiness the Dalai Lama, there are, or a serious happiness practitioner of some sort, attend to yourself first before you help others, okay? Because in an interesting way, if someone is drowning and you're not the best swimmer in the world, they'll just take you with them. So unless you're absolutely certain that you can help, I would urge you to have a conversation. And that conversation should be, this pattern of behavior on your side makes me feel very unhappy, insecure, irritated, whatever that is, and I would ask you if you want me to help you to change. Okay? If they don't change, I would seriously ask you to leave. Okay? Because the number one condition for anyone to be helped is to want to be helped. And unless they want to be helped, they're taking you down with them. Not a very wise approach. And now let's talk about the heart.
Yeah, so I don't disagree with you. I would just say, do it kindly, do it compassionately. And there's a quote, HHDL, he says, be kind whenever possible, it's always possible. So definitely, yes, if you're around somebody who's toxic and who's completely, disturbing your mind and your peace, then yes, you may have to take yourself away, but it could be done with kindness and it could be done with compassion. And maybe don't do it before you really practice compassion. And by compassion, I mean trying to relate to their experience, trying to understand where they're coming from. And I had another little moment with a client who, she's like, my brother, he's so selfish. I'm not talking to him anymore. He just, he's rude to my mother. He's rude to me. Every time we're at family dinners, he disrupts the dinner. And I keep trying to ask him, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Why can't you just be normal? We're all so kind to you. What's wrong with you? And I just said, have you ever asked him, how do you feel? What makes you feel? What makes you say the things you do? What's going on? What's happening inside of you? Let's take a walk. Let's talk. So maybe try that as a last resort. Actually inquire. Actually take interest in the other person. Maybe you can actually flip them. And if you can't, then... And if you can't, then good, distance yourself.
You choose, Anahita.
Okay, maybe a man. No man? Okay, man with the glasses.
Yes, I qualify.
Oh, no, you're a man. Sorry, we'll come back to you. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. Okay.
So basically, it doesn't from feminine side that people love the side that I would have. So I really liked your book. First of all, it's a great eye-opener, and I also cried a bit reading that book. So you also talked about happiness is events minus expectations. It's a great idea. Coming from a rational, male-centric, scientific perspective, that is the kind of thing that resonated with me. But like on every day, like we go through a roller coaster of emotions all the time, happiness, sad, and sometimes neutral all the time. Is it like, how do we become aware of what we are feeling, and then do we try to solve the happiness equation each time we feel an emotion? And how does that, we bring that into awareness that we are actually feeling this emotion? And do we try to solve that equation at that time when we are feeling it? First of all, we need to be aware that we are feeling some emotion, and then we need to solve it. Or do you recommend, like as you said, that you had a conversation with your brain saying that, is it true? Is this emotion? Like, is that, that's a great example, but is it always practical? Yeah. And what is the approach that you recommend? Or do you suggest that don't try to solve it at that moment, but take note of it, that you are unhappy at the time or not happy, and then later, or do you suggest that at the weekend set up some time to think through all the things that made you unhappy and try to solve those equations with all those times, and then later you don't have to follow
every time.
Don't have to do it on an everyday basis.
So I'll
sorry, I'm asking for some more practical.
Very practical is very important actually. So one chapter in my next book, which I happily say I finished last week, is exactly about that, okay? So first we need to get to feel, and I will ask you to talk about that. The idea is that we don't allow ourselves to feel anymore, huh? And if we don't feel, we actually don't tackle the problem when it happens, okay? So if we don't allow ourselves to have that feeling of, hey, by the way, I'm actually unhappy, we don't do anything about it. So, yeah, can you cover this in first?
Yeah. So basically you have a part of your brain called the insular cortex, which is responsible for many things, one of which is what they refer to as interoception. So it's your ability to feel, literally your inner environment. So like if I were to ask you, feel your gut. Try it. Try to feel your gut from within, right? Or now try to feel an emotion that you have in your mind-body system. So try to feel whatever you're feeling. Okay, so that's activating the insula. That is a part of your brain that you need in order to have empathy for another person. So a person who is numb to their inner world, their inner environment, who can't feel, whether it's their inner body, biological being, or their feelings, that person is more likely to have difficulty relating to the experience of another, to have empathy, which is actually quite dangerous if you think about it. So that's the basis.
Do you also recommend maybe mindfulness meditation or something, so that you are always aware of what you're feeling?
We're all very different, okay? What I want you to do is to get to the point where, remember the last time you felt you were catching the flu? Okay? Some physical signature in your body made you feel, oh, I'm actually under the weather, maybe I should take some vitamins and rest, okay? That should also be your response to emotions. Okay? I feel angry, I feel irritated, I feel insecure, I feel. And actually, if anyone wants to read early, I will share an early reader campaign for 200 people in a couple of weeks' time. The idea is to actually find those emotions in you. Okay? If you find those emotions in you and acknowledge them, not unlike what our parents told us. Our parents were like, men don't cry, or come on, it's okay, or what. No, it's not okay. The minute you catch the flu, you do something about it. The minute you have an emotion, a negative emotion, you need to do something about it. When you get that acknowledgement in you, believe me, it's checkmate. Because I ask 3 questions. It's a very simple flow chart, and it will return me back to happiness every single time. Question number 1 is it true? If my brain is intending to make me unhappy, which basically is a survival mechanism, it's telling me something doesn't match my expectations, I need to know if it's true. Okay? If it's not true, I drop it. If it is true, I ask myself the second question, which is, what can I do about it? It's very straightforward. If it is true, what can I do about it? If it was true that Aya doesn't love me anymore, now that's a very serious thing. Okay? That means I need to change my behavior. I need to ask myself, why is it? And what do I do about it? Okay? What if I cannot do anything? If there is something I can do about it, I do it immediately. If there is nothing I can do about it, I ask myself, can I accept it and make the world better despite its presence? So I lost my wonderful son, and if I had cried for 27 years, he wouldn't come back. Do you understand? There is no reason for me to get myself locked in that room because, at least not intentionally, because it's not going to change anything in the real world. But there is something I can do in the real world, what I've been doing since the day he left, which makes the world a little better, makes him proud of me, and makes me feel a little, maybe a little bit of calm in me that at least it's not for nothing that he left. Okay? Now, the idea of those 3 questions in a flowchart, trust me, would get you back to happiness if you're practicing this very, very well. And it's a form of meditation, by the way, to capture your emotion, to ask yourself 3 questions in an analytical meditation. You can get back to happiness often in 10 seconds. Believe it or not, I actually measure. Okay? When I feel unhappy, I ask, is it true? And my brain goes like, well, I mean, we should, no, if it's not true, it's dropped. If there is anything I can do about it, yeah, you can do A, B, and C. Okay, go ahead, do it. Okay? If there is nothing I can do about it, can I accept it and commit so that I make tomorrow better than today? I think we're done with time. So I want to close with one thing. We spoke about compassion. You said today is what?
Oh yeah, today is Tsagadawa. So if anyone is a practitioner of Buddhism or Tibetan Buddhism, it's the day that the Buddha is said to have achieved enlightenment. So what is done on this day is anything positive, anything virtuous one can do, they say that it's multiplied. So I want to just do what is traditional in Buddhism is, can we just imagine that all the effort we put into making this happen from Mark and the team, absolutely, the team. So everybody that has come together to make this happen, to us, to the lights, to the people that we don't even see, who, the catering and all the rest. Can we imagine that all of the effort and all of the merit that we created together goes to all those who don't have the fortune and who do not have the happiness to sit here and have this experience. So we dedicate it to all those.
Yeah, so that's the Buddhist practice. My practice, however, is I have a bracelet. So no, but the reality is, so we didn't talk much about 1 billion happy. 1 billion happy is an effort for you to become the champion of happiness to tell others. So if you're interested in the effort, we've created those, which basically is an idea, a conversation topic, basically. So if someone sees you wearing it, they'll say, what is this? And you'll say, well, it's about time we make our world a little happier. You'll teach them what you learned about happiness, whether here or anywhere else. Okay? We ask you to take 2 or 3 of them. So if you can actually make someone else happy, you give them one and ask them to pay it forward. So if you want some of those, they're available on your way out. And if you don't want to wear them, still do spread happiness. I think our world needs it a lot more than it needs all of the other fake things we've included in our life. Thank you.
Thank you.